Taxi or Uber drivers of Reddit, what are the most interesting or entertaining or f***up situations that happen to you during the shift? I used to drive Uber at Fort Myers Beach. I picked up 4 drunk as a skunk middle-aged people and crammed them into my tiny car. I was about to pull into their neighborhood nice, gated, on the water, and the one guy was like, "I need you to follow that car." And I'm like, whatever, let's see how this plays out. So we start following this random SUV and I'm like, who is this guy? And they're like, we don't know, but we have 20 minutes of babysitter left and we aren't wasting it. I reminded them they were on triple rate surcharge and they literally didn't care. Eventually the car pulled over and everyone shouts at me, "Go go go," and we sped off into the night. $100 ride, $20 tip, 5-star review, 100% worth it. Entertaining drunk, otherwise responsible people is a blast. Friend of mine visiting NYC took a taxi back to his hotel late night. Riding in the back he found a small women's clutch purse thing. Inside was the ID of a 19-year-old girl, and the business card of a police officer in a town neighboring state. The police officer had the same last name as the girl, so my friend figured the officer was the girl's father and she carried the card in case she ever needed to get herself out of a traffic ticket or something. My friend figures he can leave a voicemail on the officer's business number when he gets back to the hotel, then leave the purse at the hotel front desk for the girl to come pick up. So that is exactly what he does as soon as he gets up to the hotel room. About 3 hours later, now 3 or 4 a.m., he is in a deep sleep when loud knocks on his hotel room door wake him up. It's a bunch of NYPD detectives who want to know all the details of how he found the purse, like where he originally hailed the cab, etc. Turns out the girl was indeed the daughter of the cop on the business card, and she had been missing for a few days. The discovery of her clutch purse was the first sign of her that had popped up. My friend had paid for the cab via credit card and had kept the receipt, so he was able to pass that along to the detectives who, presumably, were able to use that to track down the cab driver and find out any information he could provide. Ultimately, my friend doesn't know what happened. The cops never contacted him again. I was unemployed at the time, quit a job due to an abusive, toxic work environment, had recently graduated a coding boot camp but wasn't having any luck landing new opportunities. Bills were piling up, and honestly I was losing hope. I'm about to call it a night. Driving drunks around gets tiring when I decide, what's one more? Turns out these 3 older women wanted to do some gambling in the next state over and had trouble finding a ride. I said yes. Figured I'd just call it a night after. We get talking. Turns out one of them is an IT consultant. They decide to pay me basically $100 an hour to hang out till they are done and drive them all home. We ended up connecting. She revised my resume and put me in touch with some references of hers. I ended up making a good buck off the fares alone, and also ended up completely turning my life around by landing a dream job with a little bit of help. I wrote her a sincere thank you once I accepted the new offer and she replied with, "Help others because you can." Not a day goes by where I don't think about how lucky I am. I picked up 4 guys wearing neon green tutus. The guy in the front seat looks at me while I'm driving and says, "Don't do drugs," then proceeds to snort from some sort of vial. I smiled and said, "Please don't do drugs in my car." I picked up a guy who either refused to pay a from the night before or didn't know she was a lady of the night. She proceeded to follow us. Finally he gets a call from someone. Seemed like it scared him because he told me to bring him back to his place. She followed us back there. I promptly left. Probably should have kicked him out sooner. Drove for Uber for a bit. Once picked up this guy who ended up being a magician. It's 2 a.m. and had to drive him into Manhattan to his apartment. It was weird cause nobody was around. The city was dead quiet for some reason. He Saturday in the front seat and told me stories the whole ride there. Once there he told me to get out and did a magic trick for me. He made $4,100 bills turn into $4 bills and gave me it for a tip. I drove a taxi in a suburb of Boston for a while in the 80s. One day, a kid in his 20s with a baseball bat hailed me and asked me to take him to a pharmacy nearby. It was the middle of the day, so I assumed he was coming from softball practice. He told me to wait. Then he went into the pharmacy, and left the bat in the car. A minute or two later, he came running out of the pharmacy, with the pharmacist right behind him. Was this guy nuts? What kind of criminal uses a cab as a getaway car? I casually reached back and locked the door just as he reached the cab. He fumbled with the handle, realizing that he left his only defensive weapon inside, and then ran off. I let the pharmacist into the cab, and then the two of us made a slow pursuit of the guy, while reporting his location over the radio. No cell phones. Eventually, he was so exhausted that I got out of the cab and held him until the police arrived. I had to testify in court and identify him. Not the sharpest tool in the shed. I drove for Uber and Lyft for a short time. There was one situation I will never forget. I was driving downtown DSM and picked up a gentleman who was just getting out of the iCubs game. He was loaded down with Cubs gear he told me about $400 worth and was absolutely trashed from drinking all day at the game. The first thing he says when he gets in is, "I know my destination is X, but I need to go to my hotel first to put all this stuff away." I say, "No problem," and he lets me know how appreciative he is and he will make it worth my time. I honestly didn't mind waiting because the ride was still active, so I was still making money. He gets back in the car and we start heading toward his original destination about 30 minutes away. We get to talking and apparently he is a beverage distributor for a company in CA. He is doing some sales in the area and asks me if I like to drink. I told him I do on occasion, to which he replies, "Do you like vodka?" and passes a full bottle of vodka to me in the driver's seat. It was sealed, thank God. He told me it was a new kind of vodka that he was trying to get on the shelves of some local bars because this vodka was originally created by some issue students. When we arrived at the destination, he thanked me again for going out of my way to drop him off and let me keep the bottle as a tip. Definitely one to remember. Back in the 70s as a student, I drove a taxi in the weekends and some evenings and nights to earn some extra money. One time, late at night, I got a call to pick a guy up at his home. At arrival, the guy hops in the back with a sports bag with few rifles sticking out. I could see that in my rear view mirror. He wanted me to drive out of town to some B road, and in the middle of nowhere he told me to stop the car on a small road in an area with a lot of trees. Hopped out of the car with his bag, came back few minutes later without the bag and told me to head back to his place and drop him off. He gave me a huge tip, and this is the first time I ever mentioned this happened. My most memorable would be, I picked up a girl coming home from work. We started talking about my education and what I did before Uber, and it just turned out that her company was looking for my skills. She gave me her card. I shot her my resume, and 2 years later I'm still working for that company and have been promoted to a junior executive level. I've never had to drive Uber since. Not me, but my mom. She was delivering Uber Eats last winter to some guy a little out of town. The location was a bit odd, but she went with it. Just outside our city on one of the side roads by some train tracks, she parked her car and looked around for any houses. None. There was a train stopped nearby, and suddenly my mom noticed a guy waddling through the deep snow towards her. A random name. Calling him Bob. He nodded, took the food, and waddled towards the train. Suddenly it starts up, and continues down the tracks. This guy deadass ordered Uber Eats while conducting a train. Picked a guy up from a strip club around 5 p.m. He had clearly been there for a while and was talkative drunk. He started talking to a friend on his phone and kept saying he couldn't go into detail because he had a lady driver. He told me he was going home and then taking his daughter out to a basketball game because there was an after-game concert she was very excited about. Little did he know, or I know because I was just following the GPS, that he had been routed to her high school. Dude's in a rumpled suit, smells like strip club, and is clearly not sober. He got a resolved look, handed me a few singles, said thanks for the ride boo, and just hitched up his pants like a man embracing his situation. I matched with a girl on Tinder by accident, and she messaged me saying she liked PBR, which is in one of my pictures. Being awkward and not wanting to waste her time, I just unmatched without saying anything. Around this time I was near the beginning of my brief tenure as an Uber driver, and who the do you think I pick up the very next day? I immediately try to slouch hoping she doesn't recognize me, and after 5 minutes of silence, right when I think I'm in the clear, she says, "Hey, did we match on Tinder?" To which I reply, "I don't think so." Then she says, "Yeah, I messaged you about PBR and then you unmatched me," and I just let out a feeble kind of "oh, yeah." Then I look down at my GPS, and there's 25 minutes left in this ride. I did not get a tip.